He ordered her like livestock. She accepted like she had no other choice. They were married before they ever met. Strangers bound by desperation and a proxy judge in Kansas City. He needed someone to help him survive. She needed somewhere to finally matter. Neither one of them expected to find a partner. But somewhere between a midnight cattle drive through a blizzard and standing up in front of an entire town to accuse the most dangerous man in Wyoming, something happened. Something neither one of them had the words for yet. This is not a love story that starts with love. It's one that earns it, the hardest and most beautiful kind. The deepest love isn't the kind that arrives fully formed. It's the kind that's built, side by side, in the middle of the hardest fight of your life. This channel carries the heartbeat of the Old West. Stories about the love that grows between people who have been broken by the world and choose, against all odds, to build something together. If this story moved something in you, let me know in the comments.
The telegram cost him 42 cents he couldn't spare. He stood there in the Bitter Creek telegraph office, his boots caked with frozen mud, and a weariness so deep it felt like his bones were turning to dust. The telegraph operator, a skinny fellow named Peterson, had seen at least half the ranchers in these parts go broke, and he wouldn't even look Silas in the eye as he took the coins. "Are you certain about this, Boone?" Silas's jaw went tight as a fence wire. "Just send the message." Peterson pushed. "Hiring a bride by mail is a mighty big gamble when you can barely feed yourself." Silas stared him down. "I did not ask for your opinion. I asked you to send the wire." Peterson gave a little shrug and began tapping out the message to the matrimonial agency in Missouri. Every click of the key felt to Silas like a hammer blow, sealing a fate he could never undo. And maybe it was. Outside, the December wind howled like it held a personal grudge against him. His horse, a mare he called Sorrow, from a time when he could still find humor in his misery, stomped her hooves in the biting cold. Silas pulled himself into the saddle and pointed her toward home, though the word felt like a lie. The ranch and his family for 11 years looked like a place the good Lord had forgotten. Fences slumped under a snow that looked like it planned to stay until May. The barn leaned over like a tired old man. And the cattle, Lord, the cattle were dying. It would have been a kindness if they died fast. But they went slow, 1 or 2 every week, staggering around confused until they finally gave up and fell. Silas had lost 14 head in the last month. The meat was spoiled. Something was rotting them from the inside out. He had tried everything he could think of. He changed their grazing pasture and switched their feed. He even spent money he did not have on a veterinarian from Laramie who took one look, shook his head, and charged him $20 just to say, "I have no idea." But the bank knew. The bank knew exactly how many cows he had left and how much longer he could keep pretending he was not drowning. Harlan Crow, the man from the bank, had made it perfectly clear 2 weeks before. He stood in Silas's own kitchen like he already owned the place, which, in truth, he nearly did. "You have until spring, Boone," Crow had said. "That is 3 months to get your payments up to date, or we will foreclose. So I suggest you get right with God, and you get right with your debts." Silas had wanted to smash his fist right through Harlan Crow's smug face. He wanted it so badly his whole body shook. But anger does not change arithmetic. And the numbers said he was finished, so he took a wild chance. He sent a wire for a wife. The answer arrived faster than he figured. Clara Whitmore, age 28, from Missouri. She was not married and had no family. Her references, they said, were available. She could get there before Christmas if he could send money for the train ticket. He sold his dead wife's wedding ring to pay for her passage. Sarah had been gone 3 years, taken by the flu. It was quick, at least. She did not have to suffer. But her leaving had left him alone in a place that required 2 people just to break even. He had been losing ground from that day on. He tried to convince himself that Sarah would have understood. He told himself this was not a betrayal, just a matter of survival. He was not sure he believed his own words. Clara's train was set to arrive on the 18th of December. Silas used the days before she came to try and make the ranch look less like a place of death. He burned the carcasses of the cattle he could not bury in the frozen earth. He patched the biggest holes in the roof of the barn. He scrubbed 3 years of lonely living out of the kitchen until his hands were cracked and bleeding. It did not make much difference. The morning Clara was to arrive, Silas stood on the train platform, watching the locomotive cut through the blowing snow. His stomach felt like it was full of tangled barbed wire. What in the world was he supposed to say to a woman he had purchased just like she was livestock? The train hissed and groaned to a halt. Steam poured onto the platform. People began to step down. There was a merchant, a couple of miners, and a family with noisy children. And then he saw her. Clara Whitmore was not at all what Silas had imagined. She was not a delicate flower. She stood about 5'6" with solid shoulders, and wore a simple brown traveling coat that looked like it had seen plenty of use. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, showing a few early streaks of gray. Her face had sharp angles, and she had the look of someone who was always thinking, always adding things up. She saw him immediately, the only man on the C platform who looked desperate enough to be waiting on a mail-order bride, and she walked right up to him. "Mr. Boone," she said. Her voice was flat and direct, with no hint of romance in it. "Miss Whitmore," he managed, reaching for her single travel bag. She handed it over without a second thought. "It is Mrs. Boone. A judge in Kansas City married us by proxy 3 days ago. It saves time." Silas just blinked at her. "We are already married?" "Yes," she said. "The agency finds it is simpler for legal reasons. Do you have an issue with that?" He probably should have had an issue with it, but mostly he was just relieved he would not have to suffer through some clumsy wedding ceremony in front of the whole town. "No, no issue." "Good. Is that your wagon?" He nodded toward the old buckboard he had to borrow from a neighbor because the axle on his own was broken and he had no money to fix it. "The ranch is about an hour north. The roads are rough." "The roads are always rough in the winter," she replied, and climbed right up onto the seat without waiting for his help. "Let us go. We are burning daylight." That ride north was the longest hour of Silas's entire life. Clara did not bother with small talk. She did not ask about the town or the weather or any of the usual polite nonsense people use to fill the silence. She just sat beside him, still and quiet, studying the passing landscape as if she were committing every tree and rock to memory. Finally, as they got closer, she spoke. "How many head?" "What is that?" "Your cattle. How many do you have?" 63. I had 77 back in September." "You have lost 14 in 3 months," she stated. It was not a question. "Yes." "What is killing them?" Silas's hands gripped the leather reins tighter. "I do not know. The vet could not figure it out. They just get weak, stop eating, and then they die." "Is it all of them? Or just certain ones? Is there a pattern to the deaths? By age or location or what pasture they are in?" Silas had to stop and think. Nobody had ever asked him questions like that. "Well, now that you mention it, it is mostly the ones that drink from the South Creek. The cattle on the North Spring, they seem to be doing better." Clara's eyes got sharp. "Show me the South Creek as soon as we arrive." "It is just water," he said. "If your cattle are dying and there is a pattern," she replied, "it is not just water. Show me." There was something in her voice, a tone of command that made Silas close his mouth and just nod. They got to the ranch as the sun was setting low in the sky. Clara stepped down from the wagon and just stood there for a long moment, taking it all in. The slumping barn, the patched-up fences, the miserable cattle huddled together against the wind, their ribs showing clear through their hides. Silas braced himself, waiting for her to cry or to complain or to demand he take her straight back to town. But she did not do any of that. Instead, she walked directly to the nearest heifer. It was one of the sick ones. Silas knew by its dull eyes and how its head hung low, its legs trembling. Kara walked around it slowly, looking at it from every direction. Then she did something that made Silas hold his breath. She gently lifted the heifer's lip to look at its gums, then pressed her fingers into the side of its neck. She ran her hand down its back, feeling every single bone in its spine. "How long has this one been sick?" she asked. "She started getting weak a while back. Stopped eating about 3 days ago." "She is not going to live," Clara said, and her voice was like a doctor's. "But maybe we can save the others. Take me to the South Creek. Now." "But it is almost dark." "Then you will bring a lantern. Let's move." Silas quickly grabbed a lamp and led her across the frozen fields to the place where the creek cut through a small ravine. The water itself looked perfectly fine, running clear and fast. There was not even any ice on it yet. Clara knelt down at the bank, dipped her fingers into the cold stream, and then she touched them to her tongue. Silas stared, shocked. "What in God's name are you doing?" "Copper," she said simply. "What?" "There is copper in this water. It is not enough to kill them quickly, but it is enough to poison them slowly over time." "Where does this creek come from?" "Upstream." "Is there a mine up there?" A cold dread, colder than the winter wind, washed over Silas. "Crow. Harlan Crow, the banker. He has mining operations about 2 miles west of here, but his runoff. It should not be getting into my creek." "Well, it is," Clara said, standing up and brushing the snow from her coat. "And it is killing your herd." "Your herd, which tells me someone is either careless or they are trying to keep a secret." "Good Lord, the good Lord is not going to clean up your water source, but I just might be able to." She spun around and headed back to the house, leaving Silas standing there holding a lantern, his whole world feeling like it was shifting right under his boots. He finally caught up with her on the porch. "Who in the world are you?" She stopped, her hand resting on the door. "I already told you I am Clara Whitmore, your wife. That is not what I am asking. The way you examined that cow, how you tested the water, that is not something a normal person does. Normal women do not make it out here, Mr. Boone. I learned that lesson a long time ago." She swung the door open. "I worked as an apprentice for a traveling animal healer for 6 years. I learned more about what ails cattle than most educated veterinarians. When the agency inquired about my skills, I told them. They mentioned you needed a hand on a ranch. Well, here I am. They never told me that. You never bothered to ask. You requested someone sturdy and used to a hard life. That is exactly what you received." She came inside, glancing around the simple kitchen. "Is this the only room that has any heat?" "The stove is in this room. The bedroom has a fireplace, but I have not lit it yet. We have to plan our next move, and I refuse to do it while I am freezing." Silas got the bedroom fire going while Clara unpacked her one small bag, which contained hardly anything at all. There were 2 dresses, 1 nightgown, a Bible, and a leather-bound journal packed with notes and drawings she had made by hand. By the time he returned, she had the journal spread open across the kitchen table. "Sit down." He sat. Clara leafed through the pages, which were filled with her neat script. She had notes on symptoms, remedies, and different cases. Copper poisoning shows up in different phases. At first, they lose their appetite, then they get weak, start stumbling, and you see yellowing in their gums and eyes. In the end, their liver gives out. If your cattle have been drinking from that creek since the fall, the ones that are already sick are likely too far gone to save. But we can still save the ones that are not showing any signs yet. How do we do that? We have to get them away from that tainted water right now. All of them. Tonight, if we can manage it. They have to have clean water and an iron supplement to help counteract the copper inside them. We are going to need some scrap iron, molasses, and thyme. Silas rubbed his tired face. The North Spring. That is where they're all going. How many ranch hands do you have? Not a one. It is just me. Her head snapped up. You are managing 63 head of cattle all by yourself? I cannot afford any help. Well, you cannot afford to lose any more cattle either. We are moving them tonight, just you and me. It is about a half-mile to the north pasture, is that right? Through deep snow, in the pitch dark. Miss Whitmore. It is Mrs. Boone, she said, correcting him. And I did not travel all this way to stand by and watch your ranch fail because you are too cautious. We move them right now or we will lose them. The choice is yours. Silas just stared at this woman he had only known for less than 3 hours. This woman who had tasted poisoned water, figured out what was killing his herd, and was now telling him to drive his cattle through a blizzard in the dead of night. You are being serious. I never kid about livestock. She got to her feet. Go get your warmest clothes. We are wasting daylight, and we do not have any to spare. They herded the cattle northward in a darkness so complete Silas could hardly make out his own hands. The wind howled like a banshee, and the snow blew sideways. The sickest animals stumbled and fell down. A few of them never got up again. Clara walked right alongside them, yelling words of encouragement, physically shoving the weaker ones to keep them moving. She never complained, not once, and she never faltered. When one young heifer went down for good, Clara knelt beside her in the snow. She is gone. We have to leave her. No, Clara's voice was like flint. We mark the spot where she fell. We will examine her tomorrow. We have to be absolutely sure of the diagnosis. By the time they finally got the remaining cattle to the north pasture, Silas had lost all feeling in his feet, and Clara's lips were turning blue from the bitter cold. But the animals were finally drinking clean water, huddled up together against the wind, and they were alive. They stumbled their way back to the house just as the sun came up, painting the sky a terrible gray. Inside, Clara fell into a chair. Her hands were shaking, not from being cold, but from pure exhaustion. Silas built the fire back up in the stove and started a pot of coffee. Neither of them said a word for what felt like a very long time. Clear's throat. At last, Clara spoke. How deep in debt are you? What was that? With the bank, how much is the loan? Silas had to swallow hard. $1,800 due in March. And do you have that money? No. Is there any way you can get it? Not unless the price of cattle triples and my 60 head of cattle magically turn into 100. Clara was silent for a moment. Then she said, the poisoning. If Crow's mining business is what caused it, he is the one responsible by law. Crow owns the bank. He is not about to file a lawsuit against himself. No, but if we can prove it to the public, he will lose a lot of his political influence. And politicians worry more about their influence than they do about one struggling ranch. She pulled her journal closer. We are going to need some proof. Water samples, soil samples from up the creek. We need statements from other ranchers. Are you the only one this has happened to? Martinson. His ranch is 2 properties south of here. He lost some of his herd this past fall as well. Then we start building our case. Write down everything. We will show a pattern that he cannot possibly deny. Clara looked straight at him, and for the first time, Silas saw something other than cold calculation in her eyes. You sent for me because you were at the end of your rope. I came here because I was at the end of mine too. But being desperate makes folks do some remarkable things. Mr. Boone, sometimes it is what helps them survive. Silas felt like he should say something. He wanted to thank her, or maybe apologize, but he did not know. What? So instead, he simply gave her a nod. They took turns sleeping that first day, one of them keeping an eye on the herd, while the other got some rest. When Silas woke up in the afternoon, Clara was already back outside examining the dead heifer they had been forced to leave in the south pasture. She was scribbling notes in her journal with fingers so stiff she could barely grip the pencil. By that evening, she had filled 3 pages with her findings and had a theory that sent a chill down Silas's spine. This was not just some accidental spill, she said, showing him the mineral residue she had scraped from the creek bed. This is a concentrated amount, Someone is deliberately redirecting the water. Why in the world would they do that? To force you out so they can buy your land for next to nothing. It has happened before. She tapped her journal. I wrote about a similar case in Kansas 2 years back. A mine owner poisoned 3 small ranches, bought them all up when they went into foreclosure, and then sold them to the railroad for 4 times what he paid. It is probably Crow, but we have to prove it. We need real proof, not just a good theory. The very next morning, Clara began mixing the iron tonic. She boiled scrap metal in water, strained it, and then added molasses to make it taste better. They treated every single animal in the north pasture, forcing the medicine down their stubborn throats. On the 3rd day, the first heifer was standing up for longer and walking with a steadier gait. By the 5th day, 3 more of them had started eating again. Folks in town began to take notice. Peterson, from the telegraph office, rode all the way out, wanting to know about the miracle cure he had heard people whispering about. Then Martinson came by, followed by a few others. Clara treated them all with the same straightforward professional manner. She explained the copper poisoning, showed them her notes, and even offered to test their water if they would cover the cost of the materials. Some of them laughed it off and some got angry. But a few of them, the ones who were also losing their cattle, they actually listened. And that is when Harlan Crow made his appearance. He rode onto Silas's property on the 8th day, acting like he owned the place, which in a way he almost did. He had 2 men with him who looked more like hired thugs than bankers. "Boone, I heard you went and got yourself a wife." Silas stepped out onto the porch. Behind him, he could see Clara through the window, watching and listening to every word. "Word gets around." "It sure does. I also heard she has been spreading some tall tales about poisoned water, pointing fingers. She has been saving my herd." Crow let out a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "You see, that is a curious thing, because those cattle were the collateral you put up for your loan. Which means if they are sick, that collateral has lost its value. And that means, technically, you have been in breach of our agreement for several months now." Silas felt his stomach turn over. "That is not—" "But I am a fair man," Crow said, leaning forward in his saddle. "So, this is the deal I am offering. Sign over 60% ownership of this ranch to me. We will just call it a business restructuring. And in return, I will forget about the immediate debt. You just keep on ranching, and I will take the profits until the loan is paid off. Sound fair?" "That does not sound fair at all. That sounds like you are stealing from me. That is just business, son. You have until Christmas to make up your mind." After that, Crow just shrugged. "Well, banks get awful particular about bad investments." He turned his horse and trotted off, his men right behind him. Silas just stood there, stuck to the ground, until the sound of the door creaking open broke the spell. Clara was on the porch, holding her journal. How much of that did you overhear? Every last word. She stood there silently for a spell. Then she said, "We have 16 days before Christmas, I know. Then we have 16 days to prove that man is poisoning your water supply. We will write down every detail so plainly he cannot talk his way out of it, and make such a public fuss that taking your land would be a political disaster." Silas spun around to face her. "That is completely impossible." Clara looked him square in the eye. "You sent for a wife you could not rightly afford because you were about to go under. I married a man I had never met because my other choices were worse. We are already in the business of doing impossible things, Mr. Boone." She went back into the house, already scribbling in her book, already making her plans. And as Silas watched her walk away, a thought hit him that should have scared him half to death. But for some reason, it did not. He had asked for a companion. What he got was a loaded gun, and Clara Whitmore Boone was only just getting started. Clara was already up and out the door, before the sun even thought about rising, testing water samples with little bottles of chemicals she produced from her bag like a traveling magic act. Silas saw her from the kitchen window, wondering just what kind of mail-order bride service was teaching its women about chemistry. He carried a cup of coffee out to her. She accepted it without a glance. The poison is stronger about 200 yards up the creek. Someone is without a doubt sending their dirty runoff straight into your water. Can you prove that? Not right now, but I will. She corked a small glass bottle and put a label on it, her hands trembling. That cold was something fierce. I need to get a closer look at Crow's mining camp. That is trespassing on his land. No, that is gathering up evidence. There is a world of difference. Not to the men Crow hires. Silas cinched his coat a little tighter. If they find you poking around up there, they will do what? Shoot a woman in Wyoming territory, a place where women are harder to find than a nugget of gold? Clara finally looked straight at him. They will escort me off their land, and they will be firm about it. And during that whole time, I will be counting every single waste barrel and memorizing how all their drainage ditches are laid out. You are out of your mind. I am just thorough. Let us go. They rode their horses up the creek just as the sun rose, looking pale and weak. The whole world around them was just frozen and empty. Nothing but sagebrush, snow, and big rocks that looked like God himself had thrown them down in a fit of rage. Crow's mining camp was nestled in a valley right where the creek started, just a jumble of shacks and machinery and men who looked mean enough to fight you over a plate of beans. Clara observed it all from a ridge high above, sketching quickly in her little book. You see that big pool of runoff water? That is not natural. They dug that ditch on purpose to go around the pond that is supposed to clean the water. All that water, full of copper poison, is pouring right into the creek. Good Lord. The good Lord did not dig that ditch. Crow did, or he paid someone to do it. She snapped her journal shut. We are going to need one of his workers to talk. Somebody who can admit they were ordered to dig that ditch. No miner is going to talk against the man who signs his paycheck, not as long as he is still getting paid. No. That calculating look was back in Clara's eyes. But men who have been fired, men with a bone to pick, they might just be willing to tell a different story. You cannot just, I can, and I am going to. Take me into town. The journey to Bitter Creek was about an hour long. Clara was quiet the whole way, her mind spinning on something Silas could not begin to guess. After they tied their horses up in front of the general store, she faced him. I need you to march into that land office. I want you to get copies of every single mineral rights claim filed in this county for the past 2 years. I do not give a damn what it costs. Clara, he started, do you trust me? It was the first time she had ever asked him a real personal question that was not about his cattle or his water or his finances. Silas looked at this woman he had only known for a week, this stranger who had figured out what was killing his cattle and was now putting together some kind of legal fight he could not quite wrap his head around. Yeah, I trust you. He saw a little something change in her eyes. It was not exactly warmth, but it was close. Then, go get those records. I will see you at the telegraph office in 2 hours. She stepped inside the general store before he had a chance to ask what in the world she was cooking up. The man at the land office was a shifty-eyed fella named Simmons, who made Silas pay $3 for papers that should have been free. But the proof was right there. All of Crow's mining claims, his water rights, every piece of land he had bought up over the last 18 months. Silas laid them all out on a table in the back and began to read. What he discovered sent a chill right through him. Crow had gotten water diversion permits for 6 different properties. 6 of them. Every single one was a small ranch, and every one of them was either already lost to the bank or on the verge of it. The whole crooked pattern was laid out right there in black and white. He scooped up the papers and hurried over to the telegraph office. Clara was already inside, speaking quietly with Peterson. When she spotted Silas, she gave a single nod. Did you get it? 6 ranches, and he used the same trick on all of them. Good. Mr. Peterson here has been a big help. Seems that 3 of those ranches sent telegraph messages to the Territorial Mining Office last year to complain about their water being poisoned. The complaints were put on file, and then absolutely nothing happened. No one looked into it, no one ever followed up. Peterson started to fidget. I probably should not have told her any of that. You should have told somebody a long, long time ago, Clara said, though her voice was gentle. How much does Crow pay you to stay quiet? Peterson's face turned white as a sheet. I do not. I am not saying you did anything against the law. I am just asking a simple question. Does he pay you? Just a yes or a no. $10 a month to tell him if anybody sends a wire about his operations. Clara took out a small notepad. Write that down for me. Put your name on it. And the date. I cannot do that. If he finds out, he will not find out, not until we are ready for him to. Clara's voice was like velvet over steel. But when that time comes, what you say will help save 6 ranches and maybe let you sleep a little better at night. Write it down, Mr. Peterson. Peterson wrote it all down, his hand shaking the entire time. Once they were outside, Silas took hold of Clara's arm. You cannot just... You are gathering all this information like you are building a case for a courtroom, but we are not lawyers. What in the hell is your plan? Clara pulled her arm away. My plan is to make it so politically damaging for Crow to take your land, to stir up so much public outrage that the territorial judge will have no choice but to investigate, to expose him so completely that even the men on his own bank board will abandon him. She started walking back to where they had tied up the wagon. I have been down this road before, Silas. Not this exact road, but one very much like it. When? She came to a stop. For a good long while, she did not say a word. Then, Kansas, 3 years ago. A cattle buyer was swindling ranchers by using crooked scales, buying up whole herds for half of what they were worth. I wrote down everything, built a solid case, and took it straight to the territorial newspaper. He lost his entire business. Her voice was flat and empty. He also burned down my employer's barn to get even. Killed 12 horses. That was the day I learned that truth and justice are fine things to believe in, but you need a good strategy to make them stick. Jesus Christ, Clara. I did not tell you because it is in the past. What is important is that we have 16 days, well, 15 now, and I know exactly how to build a case that cannot be broken. But I need you to tell me right here and now if you are in this with me or if you want me on the very next train heading back to Missouri. Silas just stared at her. This woman, who had arrived with a single suitcase and a journal filled with secrets that could either save him or ruin them both. I am with you. Then we keep on moving. The next week flew by in a dizzying haze of long days and even shorter nights. Clara spoke with every single rancher in a 20-mile radius, taking notes on their dead cattle, their bad water, and their foreclosure dates. Some folks slammed their doors right in her face. Others called her a nosy troublemaker. But a few of them, the ones who were desperate, the ones who had nothing left to lose, they talked. Martinson gave her dirt samples from his southern pasture. The widow Hovis showed her the carcasses of cattle she had been forced to burn. Old Tom Brennan, who had already lost his place to Crow 6 months earlier, sat right there in Silas's kitchen and told them just how the whole scheme worked. He came around acting all friendly at first. Said he could help me with my debt, buy me a little more time. All I had to do was sign over a piece of the ownership. Tom's hands trembled as he held his coffee mug. I signed it, felt like I had no other choice. 2 months later, he demanded I pay the entire loan back immediately. Said I had broken some rule in the contract I did not even know was there. He took it all. Clara wrote down every last word, every single detail. Late at night, she and Silas would work by the light of a kerosene lamp, sorting the evidence into neat piles. Water contamination, crooked contracts, witness statements, financial records. The kitchen table was buried under a mountain of papers. You ought to get some sleep, Silas said one night, close to midnight on the 10th day. Sleep is a luxury, Clara replied, without looking up from her work. We have got 6 days until Christmas, 6 days until Crow comes calling for your answer. We are not going to have enough proof, are we? She finally lifted her eyes to meet his. I do not know. Maybe, if we can convince one of Crow's own men to switch sides, somebody who actually dug that poison ditch and can swear to it. It was done on purpose. That is not going to happen. It just might. Clara presented a piece of paper. There is a fellow named Jack Wheeler. He worked for Crow up until last month, but he got let go for drinking. He is angry, has no money, and is staying at a boarding house in Rock Springs. If anyone is willing to talk, it would be him. Rock Springs is a 2-day ride from here. Then we will leave tomorrow. Clara, it is December. There is a big storm blowing in. There is always another storm blowing in. She stood up. We are going to Rock Springs. We will find this Wheeler fellow, and we will get his statement. That is our plan. And if he is not willing to talk, then we will give him a reason to want to. Clara shut her journal. You asked me who I was when I first showed up here. I am a survivor, Silas. I do whatever is necessary. Are you? He knew he should have said no. He should have told her she was being reckless. That they would freeze to death out on the trail, or that Wheeler would refuse to say a word, or that Crow would find out and come after them. He should have been sensible. But instead, he said, "We will head out at first light." The journey to Rock Springs was a nightmare. The temperature plummeted below zero. The wind felt like it was cutting right through every layer they wore. They had to stop twice just to build a fire so they would not freeze solid. Clara never uttered a single complaint. She just kept on riding, her face as determined as stone. They finally made it to Rock Springs on the 11th day, right before Christmas. The town was a grimy coal mining pit full of drunk miners, model bull. It was a town full of desperate women, with a quiet violence just waiting to boil over. Clara walked into that boarding house, like she held the deed. I am looking for a man named Jack Wheeler. The landlady, a tough-looking woman with eyes that missed nothing, gave Clara a long look from head to toe. He owe you money? No, Clara said. I am here to offer him some. Well, that changed the tune right quick. The landlady jerked her thumb toward the stairs. Room 6. He is probably drunk as a skunk. Wheeler was, in fact, plenty drunk. He opened the door in nothing but his undershirt, stinking of cheap whiskey, his eyes bloodshot and full of meanness. Who in the hell are you? My name is Clara Boone, and this is my husband Silas. We need to have a talk with you about Harlan Crow. Wheeler's face went dark. Ain't nothing to talk about. We will pay you $50 for 1 hour of your time. That pulled him up short. $50 was more cash than most miners saw in 2 long months. Come on in. The room was a complete wreck. Empty bottles were everywhere. Clothes were filthy, and the whole place smelled of stale liquor and hopelessness. Clara sat down on the only chair like she was a queen holding court. Silas stood by the door, just watching. You used to work for Crow's mining company, Clara stated, not asking. Yeah, I did. Right up till that son of a gun fired me. And why did he fire you? Claimed I was drunk on the job. I was not. Well, not on that particular day, anyhow. Wheeler found a bottle and took a long pull. The real reason is, I saw something I was not supposed to see. Clara leaned in, her voice low. What was it you saw? Was it you? I saw Crow and his foreman out there digging a drainage ditch leading from the waste pond right into the creek. I went and asked them what they were doing. The foreman told me it was none of my business. Then Crow told me that if I opened my mouth about it to anyone, I would live to regret it. Wheeler let out a bitter laugh. A week later, I was out of a job, blacklisted from every single mine in this territory. Would you be willing to put that down in writing and testify to it? Wheeler's eyes got narrow. Testify? Are you all trying to build some kind of case against Harlan Crow? Yes, we are. Then you are a bigger fool than I thought. Crow has got half the judges in Wyoming in his back pocket. You think a sworn statement from a drunk miner is going to change a thing? It will if there are enough of us, Clara said, her voice quiet but steady as a rock. 6 ranches, Mr. Wheeler. 6 families have been ruined by the exact same thing. Their water gets poisoned, their cattle die off, and then the bank forecloses. If we can prove he did it on purpose, if we can make enough noise to force the territorial government to step in— They will not, Wheeler interrupted, taking another drink. All you will do is paint a target on your own backs. We are already targets, Silas said, speaking for the very first time. I have 6 days before I lose everything my family poured their blood and sweat into. If there is even a sliver of a chance your testimony can help, I will take it." Wheeler looked at him, really saw him, then looked back at Clara. $50. Clara counted out the money. $50, and your statement in writing, signed and dated. Wheeler wrote for a good 20 minutes, his hand a bit shaky, but a man could read it. When he was done, Clara read over it real careful. Then she folded the paper and tucked it into her journal. "If this thing goes to trial, we will call you to be a witness. If this thing goes to trial, I will probably be 6 feet under." Wheeler stuffed the money in his pocket. "Crow does not lose, Mrs. Boone. Men like him, they never do." "Men like him only lose when people decide to stop being afraid," Clara said as she stood up. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Wheeler." They rode back under the dark sky, pushing the horses hard to make up for lost time. Silas could see how bone-tired Clara was by the way she swayed in her saddle, but she never once asked to stop. "You reckon his testimony will be enough?" he asked her. "No, but it is another piece of the puzzle, another little crack in Crow's armor." She was quiet for a minute. "We need one more thing, something big, something that will make the whole town have to choose a side." "Like what?" "I do not know yet." Her breath made white clouds in the cold air. "But we have got 4 days to figure it out." They finally made it back to the ranch on the 13th day before Christmas. The cattle out in the north pasture were looking healthier. Their coats were starting to get a little shine back. Their eyes were bright again. The iron tonic was working. It meant survival was possible. But possible was a long way from certain. Clara spent the entire next day putting all their evidence together into one single document. She had the witness statements, the water samples, the bank records, and a timeline of all the foreclosures. She wrote it all down with the care of a hunter setting a perfect trap. Silas watched her, and he felt something move inside his chest. It was a feeling that had nothing to do with business or just staying alive. It had everything to do with the stubborn way she set her jaw and the fierce fire in her eyes. It was about the way she fought for his ranch like it was her own. Because, in a way, it was her own now. That proxy marriage made it legal on paper. But this fight, this was what was making it real. "Clara," he said. She looked up from her work. "When all this is over, if we survive this—" "When," she corrected him. "Not if. When we survive this." "Right. When we survive this," he said. "I want you to know that I am grateful. For everything. For you." A little bit of the hardness in her face seemed to melt away just for a second. "Do not be grateful just yet. We are not done fighting." That very night, Crow came calling again. But this time he did not bring his hired guns. He brought the sheriff. Silas and Clara met them on the front porch. The sheriff looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Crow looked like he had just won the world. "Mr. Boone, Mrs. Boone, the bank has made a decision to move up your foreclosure date. Instead of this spring, you now have until December 25th. That is 2 days from now." Clara's hand found Silas's and squeezed it hard. "On what grounds?" Her voice was as steady as could be. "Devalued collateral on account of the cattle deaths, failure to maintain the property to certain standards, and your outstanding debts," Crow said with a slick smile. "It is all perfectly legal. The sheriff is just here to serve you the official notice." The sheriff handed the papers to Silas. Clara took them from him and read every word. "This is fraud. This is business," Crow shot back. "You have got 48 hours to come up with $1,800 or get off the property." Crow tipped his hat. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Boone." They just rode off, leaving Silas and Clara standing there in the snow, holding what felt like a death warrant. Clara read that notice 3 times over. Then she looked right at Silas. "We are out of time." "I know. which means we cannot afford to wait for a trial or some long investigation. We have to drag this out into the light right now, tomorrow. How? Clara's eyes looked as hard and cold as winter stone. The Christmas gathering. The whole town is going to be there. And that includes Crow. We are going to lay everything out for everyone to see. Make it so he has nowhere left to hide. He will destroy us. He is already destroying us, she said. At least this way, we go down swinging. She grabbed his arms, her grip strong. I need you to trust me, Silas. Just one more time. Can you do that? Silas thought about his late wife, Sarah. He thought about the ranch his own father had built with his bare hands. He thought about the last 3 years of just slowly drowning. His thoughts turned to Clara, that spitfire of a woman who just showed up one day with a case full of chemicals and a backbone made of pure iron. All right, he thought. I trust you. Tomorrow, we settle this thing for good. Sleep was not on the menu that night. Clara sat at the old kitchen table making copies of her evidence by hand. She made 3 whole sets. One was for the territorial judge, another for the newspaper, and the last one for the town council. Her handwriting started to get a little shaky as the night wore on, but she never once stopped. Silas just brewed coffee and watched her, feeling about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. There has to be something I can do. There is? Ride out to every rancher we spoke with. You tell them to be at the Christmas get-together tomorrow. And tell them to bring any proof they might have. Clara never even looked up from her papers. We need people there, Silas. We need witnesses. Folks who are willing to stand up in front of everyone and say that Crow ruined them. Half of them won't show. They're too darn scared. Then we will make do with the half that will. She finally looked him square in the eye. This whole thing only works if we are not up there by our lonesome. If it is just the 2 of us making claims, Crow will just wave it off as a couple of failed ranchers with sour grapes. But if you have 6 families or 8 families all telling the same exact story, well, that is a pattern. That is what you call proof. Silas was in the saddle before the sun came up. He stopped first at the Martinson place, where the man answered the door holding a shotgun and a face full of suspicion. What do you need, Boone? The Christmas gathering tomorrow. I need you to be there. What for? Because Clara is fixing to expose Crow in front of the whole town, and she's going to need witnesses. Martinson let out a laugh, but it was not the happy kind. You 2 are plumb crazy. Crow will put you in the ground. He is already trying to put me in the ground. The bank forecloses in 2 days. I have got absolutely nothing left to lose. Silas put his hand on the doorframe. But you do. You have still got your ranch, at least for a little while longer. How long you reckon it will be before Crow decides to come after you? Martinson's face lost all its color. He would not dare. He sure would. He did it to Tom Brennan and to the Hendricks widow and to 5 other ranches that we know of. What makes you think you are so special? You think he is just going to stop? Silas leaned in a little closer. Clara has got the evidence. She has got water samples, sworn statements, and bank records. It is enough to make the territorial government come down here and investigate. But that only happens if people show up. It only happens if we make so much noise they cannot possibly ignore us. Martinson stood there quiet for what felt like a long time. Then he asked, What time? 7 o'clock. Bring your soil samples if you still have them. I burned them. Did not want that kind of proof sitting in my barn. Then just bring yourself. That will be enough. By noon that day, Silas had paid a visit to 8 different ranchers. 3 of them said they would come. 2 of them told him to go straight to hell, and 3 were not even home. He figured it was going to have to be enough. He made it back to his ranch and saw Clara standing out in the yard next to her journal, talking to a fellow Silas had never seen before. The man was thin and jumpy, wearing a suit that looked like it had seen better days. Silas, this here is Mr. Edmund Pierce. He is a reporter from the Cheyenne Daily Leader. The man stuck out his hand. Silas shook it, feeling a bit confused. A reporter? I sent a telegram yesterday, Clara explained. I told him there was a big story brewing about organized fraud and water poisoning right here in Bitter Creek. He caught the overnight train. Pierce took out a little notepad. Mrs. Boone has been filling me in on the details. He cleared his throat. This, well, if even half of what she is telling me is true, this is a mighty big deal. We are talking multiple ranches, deliberate contamination, and crooked foreclosures. This is the kind of story that gets the territorial government involved. Silas looked over at Clara. You did not tell me you reached out to a newspaper. I did not want to get your hopes all up just in case he decided not to come. She passed another one of her folders to Pierce. This is all of it. The water analysis, the statements from witnesses, the financial patterns. I need you to confirm all of it on your own before tomorrow night. Tomorrow night? The Christmas gathering. That is when we are taking this whole thing public. I need you to be there. Pierce started thumbing through the papers and his face got more and more serious. Good heavens, this is Mrs. Boone. Do you have any idea who you are accusing? Harlan Crow has friends clear up in the territorial legislature. If you are wrong about any little piece of this, I am not wrong. Clara's voice did not have a lick of doubt in it. Go test the water yourself if you do not believe me. Ride on up to his mining operation and take a good look at that drainage ditch. Go talk to the ranchers who have lost everything. I am not asking you to just take my word for it. I'm asking you to do your job. Pierce just looked at her for a long, hard moment. Then he snapped the folder shut. I will need to verify this water contamination myself. Can you show me the creek? Silas will take you. I have got more work to finish up here. Silas led Pierce up the stream to South Creek. Turns out the reporter brought his own little testing kit. It was basic, but it was enough to tell if copper was in the water. He got down on his knees by the edge of the creek running his test with the steady hand of a man who had done it a time or two before. She is right. There is definitely copper in this water. High levels of it. He started scribbling on his notepad. How many head of cattle have you lost? 14 since September. It would have been a whole lot more if Clara had not figured things out. Your wife seems to know a surprising amount about taking care of livestock. She was an apprentice to a traveling healer for 6 years. Knows more about cattle than most of the veterinarians I have met. Pierce's head snapped up. A woman veterinarian's apprentice. Now that is something you do not hear every day. Clara is something else. Silas watched that poisoned water just flow on by, carrying its poison downstream. She is also right about everything else. Crow has been knocking down small ranches on purpose so he can snatch them up for pennies on the dollar. The water poisoning is not an accident. Can you prove it was on purpose beyond just the contamination itself? We have got a signed statement from one of his old workers, a man by the name of Jack Wheeler. He personally saw Crow and his foreman digging that drainage channel. Pierce started writing even faster. I will need to have a talk with him. He is over in Rock Springs, probably drunk, but his statement is signed and dated. I will catch the train tonight. If his story checks out, this is front-page news. Pierce stood up, brushing the snow from his trousers. Mrs. Boone, she understands that this could put the both of you in some real danger, right? Crow is not the type to just lay down and let you expose him. We are already in danger. We lose the ranch in 48 hours. It cannot get much worse than losing everything you have. Pierce gave him a look that said it could most certainly get worse, but he did not say it out loud. Back at the ranch house, Clara had finished her copying and was now writing something new. A speech. Silas realized she was getting her exact words ready for what she would say at the gathering. The reporter, he believes you, Silas told her. Good. That gives us one advantage. She just kept on writing. Did Martinson say he would come? Yeah, him and 2 others. Might be more if the word gets around. It will have to be enough. Clara finally put her pen down. Crow is going to be there tomorrow. So is the sheriff, the mayor, and likely half the town council. The second I stand up and start laying out the evidence, there is going to be a moment, maybe 30 seconds, when they are all too stunned to do anything. That is our chance. We have got to get the most important facts out before Crow can find a way to shut us up. What if he does not let you speak at all? Then I will just have to speak anyway, but louder. She looked right at him. This is going to get ugly. Silas Crow might try to have us arrested. He might even try to physically drag us out of there. I need to know you are ready for that. I am ready. Are you? Clara stood up and walked around the table. Because once we start this, there is no turning back. We are burning every last bridge we have. If we fail, we lose the ranch and probably land in jail on some made-up charge. If we succeed, we make an enemy so powerful he will spend the rest of his life trying to ruin us. She took both of his hands in hers. I need you to truly understand what you are risking here. Silas looked down at their hands together, hers calloused from all her work, his scarred from a lifetime of ranching. Just two desperate people who had bet every last thing on a marriage that had started as a business deal and had somehow turned into something else entirely. I understand. And I'm still right here with you. Clara's hands squeezed his a little tighter. Then she let go and went right back to working on her speech. They stayed up till midnight, going over her presentation, guessing what folks might object to, and getting their answers ready. When they finally turned in for the night in their separate rooms, just like they had every night since Clara first arrived, Silas just laid there awake, staring up at the ceiling, wondering if tomorrow was going to be the day that saved them or the day that destroyed them. The Christmas gathering was held at the town hall. It was a drafty old building that smelled of pine needles and melted candle wax. By the time Silas and Clara got there at 6:30, the place was already filled to the brim. There were families, couples, and little kids running around chasing each other. Somebody had even set up a little nativity scene in the corner. There was punch and cookies. It looked for all the world like a celebration. But it was about to become a battlefield. Crow was there, of course, holding court up near the front, sharing a laugh with the mayor and a few of the councilmen. He spotted Silas and Clara the moment they walked in, and his smile just got wider. He lifted his glass to them like he was given a toast. Clara paid him no mind. She found a little spot along the side wall and put down her satchel, the one that was chock full of evidence. Silas stood right there beside her, his eyes scanning The whole town was there. Martinson was in the crowd. So was the widow Hendress. Tom Brennan stood toward the back, looking a mite jumpy. Silas saw 3 other ranchers he knew by sight, but not by name. That made 6 witnesses altogether, maybe 7 if that Pierce fella showed up. The mayor called for order right at 7 o'clock. Welcome, folks, to Bitter Creek's Christmas Social. Before we get to the good part, we have a couple of announcements. Clara waited patiently through the mayor's long speech. She sat through the pastor's blessing, and then through 2 little children reciting poems about snow and angels. Her hands stayed resting on her satchel, but Silas could see the tightness coiled in her shoulders. Finally, the mayor asked, "Anybody else got something to say before we get to the refreshments?" Clara got to her feet. "I do." Every single head in that room swiveled to face her. The mayor blinked, surprised. "Mrs. Boone, I had no idea. I have proof of widespread fraud and environmental poisoning that is killing ranches all across this county." Clara's voice rang out, steady as a rock. "And I mean to lay it all out, right here and now, in front of everyone." You could have heard a pin drop. Crow's smile just melted off his face. He put his drink down. "This is hardly the time or the place for this. This is exactly the time and the place. Christmas is a time for truth and justice and saving what's good." Clara pulled the first paper from her satchel. "For the last 18 months, Harlan Crow has been poisoning the water holes on purpose. He did it to push small ranchers to the brink of foreclosure, all so he could snatch up their land for pennies on the dollar." A low murmur started to spread through the crowd. The mayor raised his hands for quiet. "Mrs. Boone, those are some mighty serious things to say. They are not things to say. They are facts." Clara held up a small glass bottle. "This here is water from Silas Boone's South Creek. It was tested by an independent lab and found to have copper levels 15 times higher than what's safe. The poison is coming from mining runoff, intentionally funneled away from Mr. Crow's operation 2 miles up the creek." "That's hogwash," Crow snapped, but his voice was strained. "Mining runoff is strictly regulated. It is regulated if you actually follow the law. You did not." Clara produced another document. "This is the sworn testimony of Jack Wheeler, who used to work at your mine. He personally saw you and your foreman digging a drainage ditch that bypassed the safety ponds and sent that poison water straight into our creek system. It is signed, dated, and was confirmed by a reporter from the Cheyenne Daily Leader who spoke with him just last night. The murmuring grew louder. Crow's face started turning a deep shade of red. Wheeler is a drunk and a liar. Wheeler is a drunk who kept records, and he is not the only one who saw. Clara looked out at the faces in the room. Mr. Martinson, you lost some of your herd this past fall. Martinson got to his feet slowly. I did. 30 head. They had the same sickness as Boone's cattle. Widow Hendress. The widow stood up tall. I lost my entire herd. 42 animals all gone. Tom Brennan. Tom stood. Crow took my ranch 6 months ago. He ran the same play on me. My cattle got sick. The bank said my land wasn't worth as much. Then came the foreclosure notice. One after another, the other ranchers stood up. 6 people in all scattered around the room, every one of them telling the same dark story. The room was pure chaos by then. Folks were shouting out questions. The mayor was trying to get folks to settle down. The sheriff just stood there looking like he didn't know which way was up. Crow shoved his way to the front. This is nothing but a setup planned by a bunch of folks who can't run a ranch to save their lives and need someone else to blame. This is documented proof. Clara's voice sliced right through the uproar. We have water samples and soil samples. We have financial records that show you filed for water diversion permits on 6 different properties, and every single one of those properties is now in foreclosure. We have testimony from your own men, a pattern so plain that even the territorial government will not be able to ignore it. The territorial government does not give a hoot about a few dead cattle or some wild stories from a mail-order bride who has been in this town less than a month. Crow's voice was getting louder. You do not know the first thing about this territory or how things get done out here. I know how cheating works. I saw this game before, down in Kansas about 3 years back, when a cattle buyer was using crooked scales to cheat ranchers out of their money. He is sitting in a prison cell right now. Clara took a step closer. I know how to build a case with solid evidence. I know how to get the newspapers interested, and I know that men like you are counting on good people being too afraid or too worn out to ever fight back. Crow's eyes narrowed to slits. You are making a very big mistake, Mrs. Boone. The mistake was all yours. You poisoned our water. You tore families apart, and you thought no one would ever put the pieces together. Clara turned to face the mayor. I am officially asking for a territorial investigation into Mr. Crow's mining business and his land purchases. I have 3 identical packets of evidence right here. One is for you, one is for the territorial judge, and the last one is for the Cheyenne Daily Leader. The back door of the hall creaked open. Edmund Pierce stepped inside with a notebook in his hand. I am Pierce, from the Leader. I can confirm that I have checked Mrs. Boone's water contamination claims myself, and that I have interviewed Jack Wheeler. His story is believable and full of details. This report will be in tomorrow's paper. The room just exploded. People were yelling, and the mayor was pounding his gavel. Crow just stood there, frozen, the powerful image he had built for himself cracking apart right before our eyes. Then Crow did something no one expected. He started to laugh. You think you have won? You think one little newspaper story and a pile of papers changes a single thing? He looked right at the sheriff. Arrest these people. The sheriff did not budge. On what charge, Mr. Crow? Trespassing, harassment, stealing private information from my mine. I have not stolen a thing, Clara said. Every water sample was collected from public streams. Every person who spoke did so willingly. And every piece of paper is either a public record or belongs to me. Then for slander, for defamation, for making up lies. The truth is not defamation, Mr. Crow. Pierce was scribbling in his notebook as fast as he could, and trying to have someone arrested for bringing evidence to a public meeting. That is going to read real nice in the morning paper. Crow's face was almost purple. You are all going to be sorry for this, every last one of you. Is that a threat? Clara's voice was soft, but it had an edge to it. Because threatening witnesses in a room full of people with a newspaper man taking notes, well, that is also going to read real nice in the paper. Silas watched as Crow's last bit of control just snapped. The man lunged forward and grabbed Clara by the arm. Silas was on him before he even knew he was moving. He got between them and shoved Crow back so hard the man stumbled and nearly fell. "Do not touch my wife!" The sheriff finally made his move, stepping in between them. "That is enough, everybody. Settle down now. Settle down." Crow was breathing heavy, his chest heaving. "These people are destroying my good name with a pack of lies." "Then you can file a lawsuit and tell your side of it in a courtroom," the mayor said. His voice was a little shaky, but it was firm. "Mrs. Boone has made some very serious claims, and they deserve to be properly investigated. You are taking her side against me." "I am taking the side of the law," the mayor looked at Clara. "I will make sure the territorial judge gets your evidence. If these claims have any merit—" "They have merit," Pierce cut in. "I have already confirmed enough to know this needs a full and proper investigation." Crow looked all around the room. He looked at the faces staring back at him, at the ranchers who stood together in a silent line, at his political friends who were suddenly finding the floorboards mighty interesting. "You'll all pay for this," he said, his voice low and cold. Then he turned on his heel and walked out, his men trailing behind him like dogs. The silence that fell after he left was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Then the widow Hendris started clapping. It was slow at first, then it got faster. Martinson joined in, then Tom Brennan, and then the rest of them. Clara just stood there, still holding her packet of evidence, looking completely stunned. The mayor cleared his throat. "Well, that was... I suppose we are finished with announcements for the evening. Let us move on to the refreshments." People started talking again, and the noise in the room began to rise. A few of the ranchers walked over to Clara, shaking her hand, telling her thank you. Pierce was interviewing everybody he could, his notebook filling up with words. Silas gently pulled Clara to the side. "Are you all right?" "I do not know." She was trembling now, the fight going out of her. Did that really work? You were a force of nature in there. I was scared to death." She looked up at him. "He threatened us, Silas. In front of all those people. That means he is running scared. That means we won." Silas took both her hands in his. "Clara, you just went up against the most powerful man in this entire county. You stood right up there and took him apart with nothing but the truth and a whole lot of nerve." "We took him apart. You were up there. You stood by me. You did all the work. You are the one who built this case. You trusted me. When every other person thought I was chasing windmills, you believed in me." Clara's eyes were shining. "That is not just anything, Silas." They stood right there together in the middle of all the commotion, holding hands, while the whole town started to truly understand what had just happened. Pierce found them about an hour later. "I have got enough material for 3 articles, maybe even 4. This is going to be big news, Mrs. Boone. Territorial big. Will it be enough to stop the foreclosure? I cannot say for sure, but I can tell you this. By tomorrow morning, everybody in the Wyoming Territory is going to know Harlan Crow's name, and they are going to know exactly what he has been accused of. That kind of attention, well, it makes it awfully hard for judges to side with him." It was not a sure thing, but it was hope. They rode back to the ranch through snow that had begun to fall again, soft and quiet. The homestead looked different to him somehow. It was still beaten down, still hanging on by a thread, but it did not feel like it was dying anymore. Clara went right to the bedroom, fell onto the bed with all her clothes on, and was asleep in an instant. Silas gently laid a blanket over her and went out to check on the cattle. They were okay, healthy and holding on. When he came back inside, Clara was awake. She was sitting at the table with her journal open. "I could not sleep. Too much buzzing around in my head." She looked up at him. "Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. It is also the foreclosure deadline." "I know." "Even after everything we did tonight, Crow could still find a way to push it through. He could still take this ranch. Then we will face it." Silas sat down across the table from her. "We will face it together." Clara was quiet for a good long while. She finally said, "I came out here because I did not have anywhere else on earth to go. I had no family, no real prospects, no other choices. The agency told me you needed some help on a ranch. And I figured at least I could be useful. I could earn my keep. I could just survive. You did a whole lot more than just survive, so did you. You could have put me on a train back east the minute I started stirring up trouble. You could have told me to keep my head down and not make waves, but you did not do that. You stood with me even when it was flat out dangerous." Silas reached a hand across that table and took hers. "You went and saved my ranch, Clara. You might have even saved my life. Why on earth would I ever stop you? Because most men would. Most men do not like it when their wives are smarter than they are, more capable, more willing to put up a fight. Well, most men are fools." He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "I sent for a bride because I was at the end of my rope. What I got was a partner, the best partner a man could ever hope for." Clara's eyes started to shine again. "We are not out of the woods yet. Crow is not the kind to just give up." "I know that," he said, "but we are not giving up either." She smiled, a real honest-to-goodness smile. It changed her whole face. "No, we are not." They just sat there in the warm lamplight, hands held tight across the table, while outside the snow kept falling and Christmas was just around the corner. And somewhere out in Bitter Creek, Harlan Crow was likely scheming his revenge. But for right then, in that one moment, they had won. And that was enough for now. Morning came way too soon. Silas woke up and saw Clara was already dressed, just standing by the window watching the sun come up over the snow-covered fields. Christmas Eve, the day they would either hold onto the ranch or lose every single thing. "Did you get any sleep at all?" he asked her. "A couple of hours. You?" "About the same." She turned away from the window. Her face looked tired and tight. There were dark shadows under her eyes. "That article Pierce wrote should be out this morning. That will put some pressure on the judge. But Crow had the whole night to figure out his next move. What kind of move, I do not know. And that is what has me worried." Clara walked over to the table where she still had all her packets of evidence laid out. "We called him out in public, which means he cannot hide in the shadows any longer. But it also means he has absolutely nothing left to lose. And men with nothing to lose will do some desperate things." Silas was just pulling on his boots when they heard the sound of horses. More than one, and they were coming up fast. They both rushed to the door. In the dim morning light, Silas counted 6 riders coming toward the house. His hand instinctively went to the rifle he kept by the door. "Wait." Clara put a hand on his arm. "Those are not Crow's men." She was right. The man in the lead was the mayor, still wearing his fine suit from the night before. Riding behind him were Martinson, Tom Brennan, and 3 other ranchers. Silas stepped out onto the porch. "What is going on?" The mayor swung down from his horse, his face looking mighty grim. "We all need to have a talk right now." They all crowded into the small kitchen. Clara got some coffee going while the men stood around, looking like they did not know what to do with their hands. Finally, the mayor spoke up. "Crow rode out this morning before the sun was even up. He took his foreman and about 10 of his men. The word is they are heading to Cheyenne to have a private meeting with the territorial judge." Clara's hand stopped moving over the coffee pot. "To do what? To try and convince him that all your evidence is made up? That you are just a troublemaker trying to ruin the name of a respected businessman?" The mayor then pulled a folded newspaper from his coat. "Pierce's article hit the streets this morning. It is bad for Crow, real bad. But Crow has friends in Cheyenne. He has money and influence. He's going to try and bury this whole thing before it gets any further." "But the article is already out there," Silas said. "Folks have already read it. You cannot put that back in the bottle. No, but you can try to ruin the source. Make Clara look like a hysterical woman. Make you look like a rancher who is failing and needs someone to blame. He can plant just enough doubt so the judge throws out the investigation before it even gets started." Martinson stepped forward then. "And that is why we are here. We are riding to Cheyenne, too. Every last one of us. We are going to speak our piece in person." Clara just stared at them. You would do that? You put your own neck on the line for us last night, Tom Brennan said. We figure we owe you the same. Crow has a 6-hour head start on us, the mayor added. But if we ride hard, we can make it there by tonight. The judge will not make a ruling on Christmas Day, so the foreclosure cannot officially go through until the day after. That gives us a window of time. Silas felt a weight lift from his chest. You are all risking your own standing with Crow, your own ranches. He has been picking us off one by one for years, Martinson said, his voice firm. But if we stand together, maybe we have a real chance. He looked right at Clara. You showed us we could fight back. So now we are fighting. Clara's voice was a little shaky. Thank you. Do not thank us just yet. We still have to convince a judge. The mayor started for the door. Get your horses ready. We are leaving in 20 minutes. And so they rode for Cheyenne on that Christmas Eve morning. 8 riders pushing their horses hard through the snow and biting wind. Clara rode right beside Silas, her journal tied securely to her saddle, her face set like stone with pure determination. Around noon, they pulled up to a relay station to give the horses a break. The woman who ran the place, an old gal named Agnes, took one long look at their group and just shook her head. You folks are chasing after Harlan Crow, are not you? How did you know that? Silas asked. Because he came through here about 3 hours ago. Paid me $10 not to tell a soul which way he went. She poured them all some coffee anyway. I am telling you because I do not take kindly to men who think they can buy a person's silence. He took the north route through Patterson's Pass. It is a quicker way, but it is treacherous in this kind of weather. We cannot take that route, the mayor said. It is just not safe. No, but you can cut through Miller's Canyon. It is a rougher ride, but it will shave 2 hours off your trip if you do not break your necks doing it. Agnes topped off Clara's cup. Is that husband of yours worth all this trouble, honey? Clara looked over at Silas. Something passed between them, no words needed, but it was solid as a rock. Yes, he is. Well, then you all had better get a move on. This weather is about to turn nasty. They took the route through Miller's Canyon, and Agnes had been right. It was a brutal ride. The trails were narrow, the drops were steep, and the wind felt like it was trying to push them right off the side of the mountain. One of the ranchers' horses went lame, so they had to leave it behind. The man had to double up with Martinson. By the time they finally made it to Cheyenne, it was pitch black, and the snow was coming down hard. They rode straight for the courthouse, a big stone building that looked like it could stand until the end of time. Crow's horses were tied up right outside. He is already in there, Tom Brennan said, his voice low. We are too late. We are not too late until that judge makes a ruling. Clara swung down from her horse and grabbed her satchel. Come on. They shoved their way through the big courthouse doors and found Crow in the clerk's office. He was in the middle of a conversation with a stern-looking man wearing wire-rimmed glasses. That had to be the territorial judge. Crow turned when he heard their footsteps. The look on his face went from confident to pure rage in a split second. What in the hell are they doing here? Judge Morrison. Clara stepped right up. I am Clara Boone. I am the one who brought forth the evidence of the water contamination and the fraud. These men here are my witnesses, ranchers who have all been harmed by Mr. Crow's business practices. Judge Morrison looked them all over. This is all highly irregular. Mr. Crow was just here to convince you to dismiss the investigation before you even investigate, Clara said, cutting him off. Which is exactly what a guilty man would do. Now that is defamation, Crow snarled. Judge, this woman is not stable. She has been in this territory for less than a month, and she has made it her personal mission to destroy my good name with nothing but lies. Water contamination is not a lie. 14 dead cattle is not a lie. 6 foreclosed ranches that all followed the exact same pattern is not a lie. Clara pulled out her packet of evidence. I have documents, I have independent verification, and I have witness testimony. All I am asking is that you look it over before you make any kind of decision. Judge Morrison took the packet from her and flipped through a few pages. This is quite extensive. It is thorough, Clara corrected him. Because finding the truth requires you to be thorough. The truth, Crow said, his voice full of contempt. is that this woman is a mail-order bride who showed up with a little bit of knowledge about livestock and decided she was going to play detective. She has convinced a bunch of failing ranchers that their own bad management is somehow my fault. I saw you dig the drainage ditch. Everybody in the room turned. Jack Wheeler was standing there in the doorway, swaying just a little bit, but he was sober enough to speak plain. Edmund Pierce, the reporter, was standing right there beside him. Wheeler? Crow's face went white as a ghost. What are you? I am here to testify, just like I told the reporter and just like I will tell anybody else who asks. Wheeler took a slow, unsteady step forward. You paid me to dig that channel straight from the waste pond to the creek. You told me it was just for a little while. You swore up and down it was legal. And when I found out you were lying, you fired me. You threatened me and my family if I ever breathed a word of it. He pulled a worn, folded paper from his pocket. But I held on to the work orders. They got your signature on them, Mr. Crow, all dated with detailed instructions on exactly where you told us to dig. The whole room got so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Judge Morrison accepted the papers and read over them real slow. His face was like stone, but you could feel the temperature in the room change. Mr. Crow, these documents seem to show you deliberately contaminated the water supply. Wheeler's just a drunk. He probably faked all that. They are not fakes, P-I-C-E said. I took the liberty of checking the signatures with the county clerk. They are 100% authentic. The iron grip Crow had on himself was starting to slip. You cannot possibly believe him. What I believe does not matter one bit, Judge Morrison said, laying the papers down. What matters is the evidence, and Mrs. Boone has presented more than enough to call for a full territorial investigation. Effective right now, I am putting a stop to all foreclosure proceedings connected to Mr. Crow's loans until that investigation is complete. You do not have the authority. I surely can, and I am. If you are innocent, the investigation will prove it. If you are not, Morrison's gaze was as hard as granite. Then justice is fixin' to be served. Crow scanned the room, his eyes landing on all the folks staring back at him. At Clara, standing tall with her journal, at Silas right beside her, at the ranchers who had ridden through a blizzard just to speak their piece, at Wheeler, holding the papers that proved everything. This is not over, Crow said, his voice low, then getting louder. You really think one little investigation is going to change anything? I have lawyers, I have money, I have connections that go all the way to where? Morrison cut him clean off. The territorial legislature, the governor's office, because I can promise you, by sunup tomorrow, every newspaper in Wyoming will be telling this story. And politicians, well, they care a whole lot more about what the people think than they do about your connections. It was the sound of a bully finally getting his due. Crow just stood there, his face turning a shade of angry purple mixed with something else. Maybe it was fear, the cold realization that he had actually lost. He turned and left without saying another word, his hired hands following him like pups with their tails between their legs. The second that door clicked shut, Clara's knees gave out. Silas was right there to catch her, holding her steady while she trembled with pure exhaustion and relief. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it," Silas corrected her gently. "You're the one who built the case. You're the one who stood up to him. We, she cut in. We did this together." Judge Morrison cleared his throat. "Mrs. Boone, I am going to need you to stay in Cheyenne for a couple of days. We have to get formal depositions, witness interviews, the whole official process. Are you able to do that?" "Yes, of course." "Good. There is a clean boarding house just 2 blocks down the street. It is safe and the rates are fair. Y'all get some rest. We can get a fresh start in the morning." The ranchers went off to find a place to stay. But Silas and Clara just walked slow through the snowy streets, heading for the boarding house. Neither one of them said a word for the longest time. Finally, Silas spoke up. "The ranch is safe, at least for now. This investigation could drag on for months. Crow might still find a way to Clara." He stopped and turned her so she was facing him. "We won. It might not be forever. It might not be perfect. But today, we won. Can you just let yourself feel that for 1 minute? She looked up at him, snowflakes getting caught in her hair, and it was like a dam inside her just burst. I was so scared the entire time. I was terrified we were going to fail, that you would lose everything, and it would all be my fault for pushing you so hard. Hey, no. Silas pulled her into a hug. None of this is your fault. You saved me. You saved the ranch. You saved half a dozen other families who would have lost it all if you had not stood your ground. Clara buried her face in his coat. He could feel her crying these quiet, shaken sobs she had probably been holding back for weeks. I did not come out here to save anybody. I came because I did not have anywhere else to go. I know, and I sent for you because I was drowning. He gently tilted her face up to his. But somewhere between that first night and right now, this stopped being about just surviving. It started being about something else. What? Silas kissed her then. It was not a desperate kiss, not hungry. It was gentle, like he was making a promise. When they pulled away, Clara's eyes were wide with surprise. I was not expecting that. Neither was I. But Clara, you are the strongest person I have ever known, the smartest and the bravest. And somewhere in these last 3 weeks, I stopped seeing you as the woman I sent for, and I started seeing you as the woman I... He trailed off like he could not quite find the words. As the woman you what? As the woman I want. Not because I'm desperate, not because I need a helping hand, because you are you. Clara let out a little puff of air and was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I have never had anyone look at me the way you are looking at me right now. How am I looking at you? Like I am not just useful, like I am wanted, valued, like I matter for more than just what I can do for you. You do matter. Good Lord, Clara, you matter so much. She kissed him this time, firmer, like she was staking a claim on something that was hers. They found the boarding house and got 2 separate rooms. Being proper still mattered, even after a victory. But they sat up in Clara's room until the sun was nearly coming up, just talking about all the things they never had time to talk about before. They talked about her childhood and his marriage to Sarah, and all the long, lonely years that led both of them to that matrimonial agency. I do not regret it, Clara said at last. Coming here, marrying you? None of it. Even when I had my doubts about you, you never doubted me. You asked questions, which is different. That is healthy. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You trusted me when it really counted. That is what matters. They spent Christmas Day giving their official statements. Judge Morrison was thorough, asking questions that had Clara pulling out her journal a dozen times to check on facts and dates. Wheeler gave his testimony again. Still a bit shaky, but telling the honest truth. All the other ranchers told their stories, too. By the end of the day, Morrison had everything he needed to move forward with a full investigation. He assigned a territorial marshal to go out and look at Crow's mining operation himself, to take official water samples, and to talk to every single person who had worked there in the last 2 years. This is going to take some time, he told Clara. Months, most likely. But from what I have seen, criminal charges are a real possibility. For environmental destruction, fraud, and maybe even conspiracy. What about the foreclosures? They are frozen solid until the investigation is over. If Crow is found guilty, they will be thrown out completely and your husband's debt will be restructured. Morrison paused for a second. You did some fine work here, Mrs. Boone. It is mighty rare to see a case laid out this clearly. On the train ride back to Bitter Creek, Clara sat next to Silas and just watched the Wyoming territory roll on by the window. The land did not seem quite as harsh anymore. It was still hard, still unforgiving, but it felt like a place you could survive. What happens now? She asked. We go home, we work the ranch, and we wait for the investigation to be over. And then? And then we keep on living together. Silas took her hand in his. Unless you have got some other plans. No other plans. Clara wove her fingers through his. But Silas, there is something I have to tell you. about why I really came out here. His gut clenched up a little. Okay. The matrimonial agency. I did not just sign up because I was out of options. I signed up because I had spent 6 years studying under a healer. He taught me everything he knew about livestock medicine, and then he told me I would never be taken seriously because I was a woman. He told me the best I could ever hope for was to marry some rancher who might let me tend to his animals as a little hobby. Her voice was full of old hurt. So when the agency said you needed help on a ranch, I thought maybe I could prove him wrong. Maybe I could actually put my knowledge to use. Matter. You do matter more than you will ever know. I am starting to believe that. She looked right at him. But I need you to understand that I am not going to stop learning or studying or treating sick animals. If we are going to be partners, real partners, then you need to accept that I'm not fixing to be a normal rancher's wife. Silas just laughed. A real honest-to-goodness laugh. Clara, you figured out my cattle had copper poisoning. You built a fraud case against the most powerful man in this whole county, and you testified in front of a territorial judge. Normal packed its bags and left town 3 weeks ago. I do not want Normal. I want you. Relief washed over her face. Good. Because I've been thinking, once this whole investigation is over and things settle down, I could offer my services to other ranchers. Teach them what I know about animal medicine. Build something that is not just about our ranch, but about helping the whole community. I think that is a brilliant idea. You do, Clara. You already saved 6 ranches just by sharing what you know. Just imagine what you could do if you made it your actual profession. He gave her hand a squeeze. I will back you up any way I can. She kissed him right then and there on the train, not caring one bit who saw them. They got back to Bitter Creek just as the sun was setting on the day after Christmas. The ranch looked just the same, still a little run down, still struggling, still held together with little more than prayers and fence wire. But it was theirs, and it was going to stay theirs. The cattle out in the north pasture were looking good now, their coats getting shiny, her eyes were bright. Clara moved between them, running her practiced hands over each animal and cooing low words of praise. Silas just watched her work, and something settled deep in his chest. It was more than relief, and it sure was more than gratitude. It was a feeling that tasted a whole lot like coming home. That evening, they sat out on the porch together, not minding the chill. Clara had her journal laid open, already making plans for a proper consulting service. Silas was sketching out some fence repairs on a scrap of paper. "We ought to have a real wedding," Clara said, clean out of the blue. "A proper one, not just a piece of paper." Silas looked up from his drawing. "You'd want that?" "I want folks to know this is real. That we chose this, you and me." She looked him square in the eye. "We did choose, didn't we?" "Yeah," he said softly. "We did." "Then we should celebrate it right. Maybe in the spring. After this whole investigation is put to bed. Something simple." "Simple sounds perfect," he agreed. They sat there in a comfortable quiet, sketching out a future that just 3 weeks ago was pure fantasy. The stars popped out in the sky, cold and brilliant. Far off, a lone coyote cried out to the moon. "Silas?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for putting your trust in a stranger, for believing in me, for standing with me when it got dangerous." "Thank you for saving my life more than once," he countered. He pulled her in a little closer. "We make a good team." "The best," Clara whispered back, and sitting there on that splintered old porch on a ranch that had nearly been choked to death, with a woman who arrived as a business deal and became his whole world, Silas Boone finally understood what surviving truly meant. It meant you don't ever give up. It meant finding your grit in places you never thought to look. It meant a partnership built on solid respect, not one person saving the other. It meant choosing to fight together, come what may. That winter dragged on, slower than molasses in January. The territorial investigation crawled along, and every day without an answer felt like standing on thin ice, just waiting for the crack. Clara kept busy doctoring cattle for the neighboring ranches. Word about how she'd saved Silas's herd had spread like wildfire, and men with worry etched on their faces started showing up at all hours, bringing sick animals and whatever payment they could scrape together. She never sent one of them away. "You're going to send us to the poorhouse with all this charity work," Silas teased her one morning as he watched her treat a neighbor's heifer for bloat. "I'm building good faith. When this turns into a real business, they'll remember who was there for them." Clara pressed on the animal's side, taking its measure. "Besides, half of 'em pay with their time. We got 3 fences mended last week. That was payment. Everything's a trade if you know how to bargain." By the time February rolled around, she'd doctored critters from 14 different ranches. By March, she had a waiting list. And then the telegram showed up. Silas had ridden into town for supplies and came back with a face pale as a sheet, a little yellow paper trembling in his hand. "What is it? What's happened?" Clara ran to meet him at the barn. "Investigation's over. Judge Morrison wants us in Cheyenne next week. For the ruling." Clara felt her stomach bottom out. "Did it say which way it's going?" "No. Just that we have to be there." Silas held out the telegram to her. "This is it. We either win this thing or we lose everything." Neither of them got a lick of sleep that night. Clara wore a path in the kitchen floor, pacing and going over every piece of paper they had, searching for any weak spot Crow's lawyers could tear into. Silas just sat at the table watching her. "What if all this proof we gathered just ain't enough?" she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "What if Morrison sides with Crow anyway? Then we appeal. We keep fighting." "With what money, Silas? What do we have left to fight with?" Clara stopped her pacing. "If we lose this, we're done." "You don't know that for sure." "No," she admitted. "But I know you. I know how careful you are with every detail." He got up from the table and took her hands in his. "Whatever happens in Cheyenne, we're going to face it together. That's enough." It didn't feel like enough, but it was going to have to be. The train to Cheyenne was filled to the brim with ranchers. There was Martinson, Tom Brennan, the widow Hendricks, and a dozen others who had either given testimony or lost their land to Crow's dirty schemes. They took up a whole car, and the air between them was thick with nerves. "He's going to walk away clean," Martinson mumbled to Silas. "Fellas like Crow always do." "Not this time," Clara said, hoping she sounded more certain than she felt. The courtroom was packed so tight you couldn't breathe. There were newspaper men from 3 territories, folks from town who were just plain curious, even a few politicians who could smell a scandal they could use. And there was Crow, sitting with 4 lawyers in slick city suits, looking as calm as if he already had the verdict in his pocket. Judge Morrison came in and the whole room rose to its feet. He looked a fair bit older than he had at Christmas, like the weight of this case had carved new lines around his eyes. "Be seated. We have a considerable amount of ground to cover." For 2 solid hours, Morrison read from his findings. The water contamination was confirmed by outside experts. The drainage channels were checked and lined up perfectly with Wheeler's testimony. 6 different ranches showed the exact same pattern of poisoning for closure, and then a quick sale to one of Crow's companies. Financial papers proved that Crow had known about the poison for more than a year. Crow's main lawyer kept jumping up to object, and Morrison just kept shutting him down. At last, Morrison put his papers down and stared right at Crow. "Mr. Crow, based on the evidence presented and thoroughly investigated, this court finds you guilty of deliberate destruction of the environment, of fraud, and of conspiracy to unlawfully seize property through systematic sabotage." The courtroom just exploded. Crow leaped up from his chair. "This is an outrage. You can't possibly—" "I can, and I have," Morrison cut him off. "All foreclosures connected to your contaminated water systems are hereby declared null and void. All associated debts will be restructured under territorial supervision. You, sir, are personally liable for all damages to the affected ranchers." Morrison's voice sliced through the noise. "Furthermore, I am referring this entire case to the Territorial Attorney General for criminal prosecution. Bailiff, Take Mr. Crow into custody." Crow's face turned a shade of purple. "You are making a terrible mistake. I have powerful friends." "Your friends are welcome to visit you in prison," Morrison said flatly and banged his gavel. "This court is adjourned." The bailiff started walking toward Crow. For a heartbeat, Silas thought the big man was actually going to put up a fight. His hands clenched into fists. His whole body went rigid. And then, just like that, all the air went out of him. He just collapsed in on himself. They led him out of the courtroom in chains. Clara just stood there, stuck in place, like her mind couldn't catch up to what her eyes had just seen. All around her, ranchers were hollering, celebrating, some of them openly weeping with joy. Martinson grabbed her in a bear hug that lifted her clean off the floor. "You did it, you crazy woman. We actually won." Silas found her in the middle of all the chaos and pulled her in close. "It's over," he said into her hair. "We're free." But Clara's mind was already moving on to the next thing. "The restructured debt. We still owe the bank. They're gonna want—" "Clara." Silas gently tilted her face up to his. "We won. Can you, just for 1 minute, please just celebrate?" She tried to smile, but it faltered. She tried again. This time it stuck. "We won," she whispered, and then said it louder, like she was tasting the words. "We won." That celebration went on long into the night. The ranchers bought rounds of drinks at every saloon in Cheyenne. That fella from the newspaper interviewed anybody who would stand still for a follow-up story. Even Judge Morrison made a quick appearance, accepting handshakes and thank yous with a quiet sort of grace. But Clara slipped away from the party early. She found a quiet spot in their boarding house and sat with her journal. Silas found her there about an hour later. "You all right?" he asked. "I keep expecting the other shoe to drop. For Crow to have one last trick up his sleeve. For the whole ruling to get overturned." She looked up at him. "When does it start to feel real?" "Maybe it never does," he said, sitting down beside her. "Maybe we just have to wake up every morning and keep putting in the work until we believe it ourselves." He glanced at her book. "What are you writing?" "Notes, for my consulting business. If we're really going to make a go of this, I need to make it official. Set my rates, list my services, figure out the right paperwork." Her pen was already moving fast across the page. "Martinson already asked if I'd consult on his breeding. Widow Hendricks was looking for help to get a pasture rotation going. Silas, this thing could really work. I swear it could. I've seen it with my own eyes for 3 whole months." They rode back to Bitter Creek and found the ranch had changed, touched by something you couldn't see but could sure feel. It was hope. The cattle looked healthier than they had in 2 years. The fences Silas put up in trade for Clara's help stood tall and sturdy. Spring was showing up early with snow melting into that good kind of mud that promised fresh green grass. But the biggest change was in town. Folks who'd sidestepped Silas for months were now stopping him right on the street to shake his hand. The bank, with new folks in charge after Crow got hauled off, offered to rework his loan on fair terms. The general store gave him credit again. "It feels mighty strange," Silas said, loading their wagon. "Being treated like I count for something." "You always counted. They just couldn't see past their fear of that man, Crow." Clara ticked things off her list. Fear can make people mean. Being free makes them decent again. That Sunday, the preacher asked Clara to speak a little during the service. She went to the front of the church, looked out at all the faces that had mostly ignored her for 3 months, and just told it straight. "I showed up here a stranger, a mail-order bride with nothing to my name but what I knew, and a stubborn streak. A few of you made me feel welcome. Most of you did not. And that's all right. I was different and pushy, and I made some powerful folks mighty uncomfortable." She let that hang in the air for a second. "But I've learned a thing or two about this town. Y'all aren't cruel. Y'all aren't cowards. You're just people trying to make it in a hard land. And when you finally decided to stand as one, when you picked the truth over being afraid, you became something bigger than any one of us could ever be by our lonesome. Somebody started clapping, then another, and soon the whole church was filled with the sound. After Widow Hendricks came up to her. "I had you pegged all wrong, Mrs. Boone. Figured you were just trouble." "I am trouble, the right kind of trouble." The widow let out a laugh. "I have a proposition for you. I've been running my place all by myself since my husband passed. I've been thinking on hiring a hand, but what I truly need is a person who understands livestock. Someone I can count on. Would you think about a partnership? I'll put up the land and the money. You put up the know-how." Clara just blinked. "You want to go into business with me? I want to learn from you, and I want my ranch to make it. Seems to me we could help each other out." The widow held out her hand. "Give it some thought." Clara shook it. "I surely will." Back at the house, she told Silas about the offer. He listened real close. Then he asked the very question she'd been asking herself. "What is it you want to do?" "I just don't know. A part of me wants to jump at the chance. But this ranch, everything we're building right here, I don't want to just walk away from it. You wouldn't be. We'd still manage this place side by side. But Clara, you have knowledge that could save dozens of ranches around here. To keep all that to ourselves just feels small." Silas took her hands in his. "I married you expecting a helper. What I got was a woman who could change this whole territory. Don't you go making yourself small to fit in the box I first imagined for you. You really mean that?" Every last word. By April, Clara had advised 18 different ranches, treated more than 40 head of cattle, and had taught 3 ranchers' daughters the basics of animal medicine. The pay wasn't a fortune, but it was steady. More than that, it was hers, earned by her own skill and not by anyone's pity. She took the partnership with Widow Hendricks with one single condition. They would train other women in livestock medicine, building a whole network of knowledge that couldn't be wiped out if one person moved on. The first 3 students started that May. Their wedding was on a Sunday in late spring, not because they had to get married again, but because Clara wanted to stand tall in front of everybody and choose Silas for all to see. No stand-in, no desperation, just her own free choice. The entire town showed up, ranchers whose herds she'd saved, families that Silas's father had helped out decades before. Even Judge Morrison came all the way from Cheyenne. Clara had on a simple blue dress. Silas wore his best suit, the same one he'd worn when he married Sarah. That should have felt awkward. But for some reason it didn't. Sarah was a part of his past. Clara was his future. Both things could be true at once. The pastor kept his words brief. "Do you, Silas Boone, take Clara Whitmore Boone to be your wife, chosen of your own free will and loved with all your heart?" "I do." "And do you, Clara Whitmore Boone, take Silas Boone to be your husband, chosen of your own free will and loved with all your heart?" Clara looked at this man who had put his faith in a complete stranger, who had stood with her against unbelievable odds, who saw the best in her when she could hardly see it herself. "I do." The kiss was soft. The applause was like a clap of thunder. At the party afterward, held in their barn since it was the biggest roof they had, Martinson held up a glass. "Held to the woman who saved us all because she refused to be quiet and sit down." "To partnership instead of ownership," Tom Brennan chimed in. "To choosing to fight instead of just giving up," Widow Hendricks added. Clara stood and raised her own glass. "To desperate choices that become something worth holding on to. To strangers who become kin. To surviving in a way that feels like a victory." They all drank to that. Later on, after the party had quieted down and the last of the guests were gone, Clara and Silas sat on their porch, watching the sun dip below the land they almost lost. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked. "Sending away for a bride instead of doing it the usual way. The usual way would not have brought you here. So no, not for a second." Silas pulled her in close. "I do regret the hard times that made it necessary. But the choice itself, the woman I found, the life we've made." She gave him a kiss. "No regrets at all." A year later, the ranch was making a profit, not getting rich, but it was on solid ground. The herd was up to 90 head, every one of them healthy. The barn had a brand new roof. The fences were holding strong. Clara's consulting business had spread to 3 territories. She had trained 9 women in animal medicine, and each one was running her own practice. The network they had put together meant that no single rancher had to face a disaster all alone anymore. Knowledge was shared freely. Help arrived quickly. She had also written and published a book on cattle sicknesses and cures, sold in general stores all across Wyoming. The money from those sales paid for scholarships for women who wanted to study to become veterinarians. Silas grew the ranch bit by bit, buying 200 acres of land right next to theirs, from a rancher who was ready to retire. They ran the whole operation as a team. Clara took care of the medical side of things, while Silas handled the breeding and the sales. People stopped thinking of them as 2 separate people. They were the Boones, a single unit, a force to be reckoned with. One evening in December, almost exactly 2 years from the day Clara first arrived, they stood side by side, watching their cattle graze peacefully on the land they fought so hard to keep. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Clara said. "What's that?" "That telegram I sent back to you. The one saying I accepted your proposal? I nearly didn't send it. I almost convinced myself that staying put in Missouri was safer than taking a gamble on some stranger out in Wyoming." "What made you change your mind?" "I figured out that playing it safe ain't the same as being alive. I was just getting by, not really living. And I was sick and tired of just getting by." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Coming out here was terrifying. Marrying you was pure craziness. Fighting Crow was basically a death wish. But it was also the first time in my whole life I felt like I truly mattered, like what I knew and who I was had some value beyond just staying alive. You matter more than you could ever possibly know." Silas turned her to look him in the eye. "You saved my ranch, you saved my life, and you saved about 30 other ranches while you were at it. You built a business up from scratch. You are changing the way this whole territory thinks about women and knowledge and power. That's not just mattering, Clara. That's making history. We're making history, you and me." She kissed him. "That's the part that matters the most." They stood there as the sun got lower, painting the snowy ground in shades of gold and rose. Off in the distance, a calf called for its mama. Closer by, their horses nickered softly in the barn, content and calm. This very land had nearly been the end of them both. The desperation that had thrown them together could have torn them apart. But instead, they took that desperation and hammered it into something tougher than either of them could have imagined. It was not a rescue, not a business deal, not even just about surviving. It was a true partnership, built on respect, tested in the fire, and proven by every single choice they made to stand together, come what may. Clara had come to Wyoming as a mail-order bride with one suitcase and a journal filled with knowledge that the world told her was worthless. She became the woman who proved that knowledge, grit, and a refusal to back down could change not just a single life, but a whole community. And Silas, who had sent for a wife because he was drowning, had learned that sometimes the best things that ever happen to you come from the wildest gambles, as long as you're brave enough to see the gift when it shows up, and smart enough to tend to it and help it grow into something real. They had both arrived at this ranch broken down and desperate. Together they rebuilt it, and in doing so, they rebuilt themselves into something worth fighting for. That was the real victory. It was not the judge's decision, or the saved ranch, or the successful business, but the everyday choice to be partners, to trust one another, to build something together that neither of them could have ever built alone. And as the stars began to pop out in the Wyoming sky, over the land they had earned with blood, sweat, and a stubborn refusal to ever give up, Clara and Silas Boone stood together, and they knew one thing down to their very bones. A desperate start does not have to mean a sorry end. What matters is courage, partnership, and the will to never ever stop fighting. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that greatest stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.